Hello, everybody, and welcome back to GSN. I'd like to start off this episode by apologizing for my previous two videos in which I recorded and made predictions for each division, predicting 17 games. The seasons are 16 still. The 17 is next year. I heard that the playoffs were 7 teams, and I predicted, and so I thought that since the playoffs were 17, it's a 17 game. I got that mixed up. That's completely my bad. The predictions are updated in my last video where I predicted the entire NFL season. Excuse me. But in this episode, I'm going to be going over the NFC South. And for this division, of course, this is the division with the Saints, Buccaneers, Falcons, and Panthers. I have the Saints going 13-3, winning the NFC South. And the conference, for that matter, getting the overall 1 seed in the NFC South. I have the Buccaneers, of course, coming 11-5, coming in second and getting a wild card appearance. I have the Falcons at 5-11, and the Panthers at 4-12. So, just an in-depth look here on why my predictions are the way they are. So let's start off with the Saints, who I think are a very, very, very good team. And if you saw my predictions video, you'll see that I said that I think the Saints are Super Bowl favorites. And I think the Saints will probably end up winning the Super Bowl. And that's my prediction. I think the Saints are the best team in the league. So, Saints had an interesting draft because they only added 4, which is a direct parallel to the Minnesota Vikings. They picked up really good center Cesar Ruiz from Michigan. As well as Zach Bond, who's a linebacker from Wisconsin in the 3rd round, I believe. Bond was, a lot of people consider to be a steal, so 2 very good picks in my opinion. I mean, obviously, there's not a whole lot of depth covered in this draft because they had the least amount of picks. But honestly, for the Saints are one of the few teams where that just doesn't matter. Their level of talent on offense is so elite. It's absolutely unmatched. They have Drew Brees, they have Alvin Kamara, they have Michael Thomas on offense. That is an elite 1-2-3 trio on the level of the Roethlisberger, Bell, Brown trio in Pittsburgh a couple years back. Like, that is on the same level in my opinion. They also have Emmanuel Sanders, wide receiver that they picked up from in free agency after I believe he went to the 49ers from Denver. This team is absolutely loaded at skill positions up and down the roster here. They even have Jared Cook at tight end, and Jared Cook's a really good tight end. Like, I absolutely cannot stress how much offensive talent this team has. It is ridiculous how much talent this team has. Like, they are loaded. I look at this team and I'm like, how are the? I don't see a scenario where this team loses less than like 10 games. You know, this is like a lock for the playoffs. When you look at the other side of the ball, it's also good. Like, obviously, it's not going to be as good as the offense because the offense is probably like the single best unit in the league on either side of the ball for New Orleans. And you look at Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins and Malcolm Jenkins, Cam Jordan. Like, it's an absolutely loaded roster. And let's not forget the line play. Like, you have Ryan Ramczyk and Taron Armstead on the offensive line. Like, this could compete for one of the best offenses in the league. Like, I don't even think it should compete because I think it is, like, the best offense in the league. And then, like, when you look at their coach, you know, Sean Payton, he's obviously proven himself. This team is obviously a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. I don't see, like, when I'm looking at the up and down the roster, when I'm looking at the Saints, I don't see a single position where I'm like, that position is a little weak. You know what I'm saying? Like, their secondary looks pretty solid. Their defensive line, offensive line, skill positions, quarterback, it's all solid. They have good special teams. This team is, like, absolutely loaded. And that's why they're my prediction to, obviously, you know, win the NFC South, which is saying a lot. It really is, because when you look at the other teams in this division, this is a really good division, especially between the first and second teams. I mean, not anything against the Falcons or the Panthers, because I think they'll both be better than their record will show at the end of the year, but they're just playing in a division that's too loaded for them. Like, you can't expect them to win a ton of games when you have a Saints team this loaded and then a Buccaneers team, it's so hard to predict. So yeah, like it's pretty simple, like not like super in depth on the Saints, but like really what it comes down to is I think this team is absolutely loaded and I think they'll win 13 games. I think this is the best team in the league. There's not like too much in-depth analysis. Like if they are just like the best roster in the league in my opinion. On to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is obviously the more interesting team of the offseason. Obviously the main acquisitions being Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, like of course. They drafted Tristan Wirfs, who's a tackle out of Iowa, and then Minnesota safety Antoine Winfield, and Vanderbilt running back Keyshawn Vaughn. Wirfs is a huge pickup because he'll do a great job of protecting Tom Brady, which is exactly what they were going for. And Winfield, I remember seeing him play a couple times this season. He was an absolute monster for Minnesota. Looking at their offense, it looks really solid. Like, I know people are going to be like, oh, of course it looks solid. It's got Tom freaking Brady, the GOAT himself on it. But, like, okay. Maybe a controversial opinion here, but Tom Brady's not, like, the great, like, he's a very good quarterback, right? Tom Brady, very good quarterback. He is a natural born leader. He is very, like, he knows how to execute plays, but, like, talent wise, he's not elite. When he throws the ball, he's great, but he's not elite throwing the ball. When I'm watching him, I'm like, I'm never watching Brady. I'm like, how did he make that throw? Like I am with like Aaron Rodgers and some other quarterbacks. I'm like, how did he make that throw? I never really say that with Brady. I mean, he's good. He's great. But most of that like good and great comes from the leadership. But Brady has some serious talent, which is something he was complaining about back in New England. He's got Chris Godwin and Mike Evans at wideout, which is going to be huge. I mean, Chris Godwin was a crazy good pickup. I remember the year he got drafted, I was watching the Rose Bowl, Penn State versus USC, I believe. And Chris Godwin was playing for Penn State, and he was absolutely going ape. Like, he was going crazy in that game. I remember thinking, oh man, whatever team gets this guy is going to be stoked that they get him. Like, they are going to be absolutely thrilled because this guy's going to be a monster, and he is. Mike Evans as well, obviously. Mike Evans is an elite wide receiver, hard to argue otherwise. Overall, the offensive line is pretty underwhelming, but Wirfs' pick should help. And if the offensive line can hold together, this offense could be absolutely like unstoppable, lethal, similar to the Saints. I just think the Saints overall have more talent. I think Breeze is a better quarterback than Brady is at the moment. There's no reason to believe that play calling shouldn't stay out of the way, but like that's like the only downfall I see for this team. You know, like if the like coaching staff and the quarterback have some disagreements, like obviously I believe in Bruce Arians. I think he'll be fine. I'm just saying that is like the lose condition for this team. On the other side of the ball, the defense is okay. The line in Tampa is solid. It's got players like Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea, and Jason Pierre-Paul, and then like Levante David at linebacker, also a really solid piece. Secondary is really suspect though. Winfield will immediately probably be one of, if not the best player in the secondary. There's just no real big names in that secondary. It's just pretty underwhelming to me, honestly, in my opinion. It's like an underwhelming secondary. And that's kind of the problem with a lot of teams this season, I feel like. You look at their secondary, it's like there is a serious shortage of good cornerbacks and safeties in the NFL. So I feel like this team on paper isn't as good as its record will be, which you may like say, oh, that doesn't really make sense. But again, with the whole Brady thing, you may think, oh, they have the GOAT. Like, they'll probably, like, this team will outperform what I think they actually have going talent-wise because of how good of a leader Brady is. Like, he's amazing. People believe that they're going to win when they're on the team, and when you believe you're going to win, you win. That's just kind of how it goes. Still, this team is obviously the second best team in the division. If the Buccaneers end up winning this division this year, I would be mad shocked. They are far from unbeatable. They're not the 2010 Warriors. I know everybody's like, oh, go to the Buccaneers if you want to win a ring. But don't expect that. this team is not a mid-2010 Warriors. This is not an elite super team. This is a team with some really good pieces and a lot of holes yet that haven't been filled. The NFL and the NBA, not the same. You can have 3 really good players go to one team, but that does not mean that that team is going to be elite because there are 11 players on both sides of the ball. That is 22, 33 if you include special teams players. It's not easy to just say, everybody that's good, come here, and we will win games because there's more than 5 people on the field at a time. Obviously, I think this is a playoff team, though, but they're not going to waltz to the Super Bowl because, I mean, they're not even the best in the division. The Saints literally show no weaknesses to me on paper. On paper, of course. This is all on paper. Like, they could end up crumbling on defense or somebody gets hurt. Like, what if Breeze gets hurt? They do have Jameis Winston, who's actually an amazing backup, so they'll probably be fine if Breeze gets hurt. So I don't even know why I mentioned that. This team is, like, crazy deep. They're not as deep on defense, so, like, a couple of crucial defensive injuries could hinder them massively. But, like, almost no matter where they get hurt, they'll probably be fine through it. As long as, like, I can see their offensive line getting hurt and that causing a lot of trouble. But outside of that, I mean, like, the Saints are the best team in the division. But, I mean, I'm supposed to be talking about the Buccaneers. I just can't stop talking about the Saints. The Saints just looks like such a good team. But yeah, no, the Buccaneers, obviously playoff team in my opinion. That shouldn't even be a doubt. But I don't think they'll make it to the Super Bowl. On to the Falcons. This is a team that's kind of fallen pretty hard ever since being at 28-3 in the Super Bowl. Falcons fans probably don't like mentioning that, but they added some decent pieces to go along with their new uniforms. But don't be shocked if this team performs pretty poorly, which can lead to Dan Quinn getting fired. He was kind of on the hot seat last season. A lot of fans were hoping he would get fired, and he wasn't. They decided to keep him around with another season. He probably grabbed his management by the balls and was like, remember when we got to the Super Bowl? Something like that. Falcons used 4 of their 6 picks on defense and only 1 on offense. They picked A.J. Terrell out of Clemson in round 1, who, admittedly, I don't really know much about. I'd argue he has a decent amount of bust potential, looking at his statistics and his numbers and like the Pro Scout, what they said were cons about him. But I don't really know. He could be really good. He could be a very solid NFL starter. Second round, they picked up hybrid defensive line pair Marlon Davidson out of Auburn, who's another not super sexy pick, but should be good enough. But a lot of scouts are saying if they ask him to transition to the inside, he may struggle. So there's that. They also drafted a punter. So big one for the punter enthusiasts out there. I know there's some punter people. So the Falcons took a punter. Their biggest free agency pickup was obviously Todd Gurley. But he's pretty prone to decline at this point. He played pretty bad last year in comparison to the year before, where he absolutely tore up the league. But he is definitely elite when he's at the top of his game. Another free agency pickup, also from the Rams, was Dante Fowler. And there's also a lot of smaller signings in Atlanta, such as the trade for Baltimore tight end Hayden Hurst to replace Austin Hooper, who got signed to another team in free agency. Honestly, when looking at the offense for the Falcons, the offense is probably going to be fine. Like, Todd Gurley and Matt Ryan, both at their peak, are unquestionably elite players. And don't even get me started on Julio Jones. Like, Julio Jones is a phenomenal wide receiver. Definitely top 5 wide receiver in the league, right? Like, he's kind of like a slightly worse version of Kelvin Johnson. Like, that's who Julio Jones is. He is he's a great wide receiver. The problem is, I'm worried that the peaks for these players are behind them. Not like Julio Jones as much, even though it might be, because I think Julio Jones can produce no matter what. But like Todd Gurley and Matt Ryan, I'm worried that their like best years are definitely behind them, and they'll never produce the same. And so now Atlanta's just trying to squeeze whatever like juice they can out of these two guys before they completely run out. I mean, obviously Matt Ryan's career has plenty of time to go yet. I just wasn't inspired by his performance last year. I thought he was like a mid-table quarterback after his MVP season. Offensive line, on the other hand, isn't special, but it's serviceable. Defensive line is the same. Secondary outside of Keanu Neal isn't superb either. There's just a lot to be desired with this team, and considering the division they play in and how shaky their coaching situation can be, I just don't see it. like I ended up saying they would go 5-11, but again, I think they're better than that record. It's just how it'll turn out because they play in such a hard division and they play a tough schedule. You know, I think they play the NFC North this year. It's just I have a tough time thinking that this team will get a lot more than like 6 wins. I don't think they can make the playoffs. The NFC's too stacked. You'll be competing with a team like the Green Bay Packers for a playoff spot, or the Cowboys. Do I think either of those teams are great? No, but still, like, this is a team, like, I have a hard time believing this team can make a run. Even with, like, a decent amount of offensive talent. The defense is just too Like, there's nobody on that defense that I'm like, oh, that's a good player. They're just like, Like, yeah, they picked up Dante Fowler, but is Dante Fowler really who you think of when you think of great defensive talent? No. He's good. I just don't see it. I just don't see it for Atlanta. So sorry, Falcons fans. But on the bright side, you could be the Panthers this year, who I have going 4-12. And again, I think the Panthers are probably better than this record, but not by much. But the Panthers' new coach, they have a new coach, Matt Rule from Baylor. He's trying to turn his team around. And they started by doing so by picking a defensive player with every single pick of their draft, which is an interesting strategy, that's for sure. They did focus more on offense in the free agency, but still, defense in every single pick is an interesting choice. They'll make your defense better, but I mean, offensive depth will be an issue. They drafted Derek Brown, defensive lineman from Auburn, with their first pick. Even though Isaiah Simmons was on the board, and I think that's what most fans of Carolina wanted, was Isaiah Simmons. Especially to replace now gone, what's his name? White dude. Big white dude. I can't think of his name. Linebacker. What's it? Kuechly. Luke Kuechly. How am I having a tough time thinking of Luke Kuechly? They wanted Isaiah Simmons to replace Luke Kuechly. They think that'd be an interesting, like a perfect. But they went with. They decided to go with Derek Brown. But in the second round, they took Yetur Gross-Matos, who I think is going to be a really good talent, as long as he doesn't like burn out from a lack of motivation. I see that being a possibility with him. There was kind of like a scandal at Penn State that he was involved in, where, and I know, scandal at Penn State, funny, there's those every year. But, where he was like bullying some of the members of the team. As long as I don't see that happening still, but if it does, like, Yetur Gross-Matos could burn out pretty quickly. I think he's an absolute baller, though. He's a guy that I really liked, and his name is cool, too. But yeah, I think, like, obviously the defense will be probably better than last year, all things considered, but there just isn't enough name talent on this team. The biggest name that Carolina acquired in free agency was definitely Teddy Bridgewater, though. After Cam Newton was let go. And this decision was kind of confusing to me, as it's hard to make an argument that Bridgewater is better than Newton was. Like, sure, Bridgewater won those games in New Orleans, but it wasn't really because of him. It was just because the team around him was so good, and he did just enough to scrape them to victory. He's just not, like, super good. Like, he's serviceable, obviously, but you aren't going to win games in the back of Teddy Bridgewater. They also acquired Russell Okung from the Chargers and Robbie Anderson from the Jets. Rounding out their major pickups. But I think it's hard to mention the Panthers and not think of the guy that this team is going to live and die in the back of, which is Christian McCaffrey. Like, he's undoubtedly the dude on this team, and without him, they're pretty much nothing. Like, Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson are both decent pieces, but this team is pretty underwhelming on offense outside of those three. Like yeah, they do have, like, Cortland Sutton, but, like, if Christian McCaffrey isn't having a good game, the pressure on this offense will be immense. Like, this is no Saints, okay? Like, Bridgewater was able to win those games because of how good the roster on the Saints was. This is no Saints team. This is just not the Saints. The defense will, of course, be super young, so, I mean, like, don't expect a ton of production out of them either. And some pieces may make an instant impact, of course, but this team needs the division to be much weaker to make a run at the playoffs, in my opinion. And, like, the 4-12 record is just a catalyst for, like, how strong the division is. But right now, the Saints and the Bucs just look to be way too strong. Way too strong. So that rounds out my predictions for the NFC South. So the final episode of the NFC will be on the NFC West. And I will be getting that to that as soon as possible. So Thank you for tuning into GSN, and I will see you guys next time.